best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show, a Star Wars podcast with in-depth discussions, analysis, always sprinkled with some silliness. I am the Geordie Jedi Pete, and I'm joined by a very special guest today as we deep dive review episode 6 of Star Wars The Acolyte. It is Chris. Chris, how are you?
I'm good. I'm still just Chris. We do need to decide a Star Wars nickname for me, but we've not done it yet. Answers on a postcard. But I am very good today, Peter. How are you doing?
We'll call you Chris Hero.
Well, you could do. You could call me Chris Hero.
We'll call you Chris. Captain Chris.
Are there any Chris's in Star Wars? I don't think there are.
I don't think so.
There was a Mark in this episode.
That did make me laugh. It took me out of it, actually. I was like, oh, God.
Well, it did for a second until I was like, there can't be a Jedi called Mark. And then I was like, well, I suppose, really, the Jedi that most of us knew was called Mark in real life.
For all the wrong reasons, it took me out of it, I think. But yes, we're here to deep dive review, episode 6 of Star Wars The Acolyte. It is now streaming on Disney+. It is called Teach and Corrupt. So we're back with the sort of double title episode names with a slash in the middle. It was released on July the 2nd, 2024, if that was sort of North America. And here in the UK and Europe, it was on the morning of July the 3rd. So again, if you have not watched episode 6, Teach and Corrupt of Star Wars The Acolyte, definitely pause the podcast right now, go watch it on Disney Plus, and then come back. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of it spoiled for you because we are going to absolutely deep dive it. So I'm just going to start by giving a sort of a run through of the episode. So as I said, it's episode 6. It's called Teach/Corrupt. It is directed by Hanelle Culpepper, and it is written by series showrunner and creator Leslie Headland and Jocelyn Bio. And basically in this episode, we see Camilla takes Osha to an unknown planet where he dresses her wounds. He claims to be a former Jedi who was betrayed by his master, drawing parallels to Osha's past. She is wary of him, but eventually agrees to try on his helmet, which is made from the lightsaber-blocking metal cortosis. On the Jedi ship at Kofar, interference disrupts Saul's attempts to contact the Jedi Council. A parcel message about losing his whole team makes it to Coruscant. Saul asks May to help fix the ship's power. At this moment, it seems like Saul believes May is actually still Osha. But May is attacked by Basil and the droid, I suppose you could say as well. May overpowers Basil and is able to reset the power. She also resets Pip to his factory settings so he can't cause any more problems. She tries to get Saul to tell her the truth about what happened on Brendok, but her wording reveals to him that she is not Osha. When the ship's power is restored, Saul stuns May and leaves her just as Master Venestra and a small band of Jedi, including Mark, arrive to investigate his message. They find the massacre and suspect that a fallen Jedi is responsible, with one Jedi suggesting that only Saul will be powerful to kill so many. When May wakes, Saul says he will tell her the truth about what happened on Brendok. So there's quite a lot to unpack in this episode. First of all, I just want to say, episode 5 was like wild. It was fantastic. It was a huge like roller coaster ride of combat and death and emotion. And I think we've had to sort of, this episode changes the pace a bit. It brings us back down. It takes away some of those crazy moments and it puts us sort of back on the ground a bit. Allows us to calm down. Allows us to not get as sweaty as we did last week. But then also gives us some like huge story moments, I suppose. And I suppose it's split into two things, really. It's split into Camilla and Osha, and it's split into Saul and May. So I don't know if I just want to start talking about Camilla and Osha. Chris, just your thoughts on Osha's situation. Now she's on this unknown planet with Camilla, and how Camilla sort of is playing some very good mind games, shall we say, in this episode.
Well, he's not just using his mind, he's using his body as well, but we'll get into that. This was, it's a very odd situation for Osha. I mean, she's she's just seen a massacre take place in front of her. She presumably is demonizing this guy who's just killed everyone, and then she's awoken up. She's not restrained. There's weapons left around for her. She's told that she's free to go. A guy who starts instantly starting to train her and starts trying to, plant seeds there and show her some attention, perhaps the attention that she's craved ever since she's left the Jedi Order. She is in a very precarious position, though, because she must be very well aware of the power balance here. She knows that she's a prisoner. She's not free to go, and she's got to try and navigate this scenario. Yet it's very interesting that when she's given the choice to kill him, she doesn't take it. She does continue to kind of listen to him and heed his words. So I think that Osha is in she's being seduced by the dark side at this moment. I think she might not be quite aware of it, but he is doing absolutely everything he can. He's disarming himself. He's putting her in a position of power. He's getting her to listen to him, to his philosophy, to his reasoning, and he's even successful at the end of the episode in getting her to put on that Cortosis helmet.
Let's talk about the Cortosis helmet, because he mentions that the helmet sort of very much similar to Yoda's cave on Dagobah. In the helmet's only what you take with you, and it sort of personifies what's in your mind. So it can sort of be a therapy chamber. It also stops other people being able to get in your mind, very similar to sort of Magneto's helmet, if you think about Charles Xavier and X-Men trying to get in Magneto's head. And it sort of, now it makes sense as to why during that battle he was very much saying to Sol that Sol couldn't get in his head. That makes sense. Couldn't get a read on him. What was your thoughts on sort of the reveal about the helmet? Because when the helmet's on as well, we see that like the actual line of sight inside the helmet is pretty poor. It doesn't seem to have any technical like readouts in there either, so it's not enhanced by any technology to help you be able to see and sense. It's literally just allowing you to sort of wallow or delve deep into your own force, into your own mind, and use that almost sort of like Daredevil, I suppose. I mean, just talk us through the helmet and what you thought about how Kamiya described the helmet. You see Kamiya fixing the helmet, and then obviously Kamiya seducing Osha to try it on willingly and not forcing that.
Yeah, it's a very good description that you give there, I think, of the kind of Daredevil. That's a good comparison. I mean, I can only imagine, apart from the these very small slits that he has, which are not going to really help in a fight, he must just be fighting via the Force, which I know, but we've heard, all the time that the Jedi use the Force. The Jedi, it enhances their abilities. They can read it, but we've never, as far as I'm aware, I mean, I don't think Kylo Ren's or Darth Vader's helmet were quite like this. They weren't closing somebody off completely from the outside world. But this Cortosis helmet is kind of allowing him to not just block everything off, but use the Force purely in a sort of pure form for him, at least. And he's tapping into that energy. I mean, Peter, did you think, was your kind of read of it, that it was going to be that he was almost fighting with a blindfold on?
He was fighting with a blindfold, but also that like he didn't need his eyes. Like he could just channel his use of the Force into his environment and like trust his training and trust his instincts, but also like use the Force to feel around him and be able to sort of fight blind. If you look at Star Wars Rebels and Kanan, Kanan gets blinded and ends up wearing the mask, but he's still, if anything, he becomes a better Jedi once he accepts that. If that makes sense. So I would also say it's very similar to wearing that mask is very similar to sort of looking at what Kanan went through. Now, obviously, Kanan that was forced to be blind. Daredevil, is forced to be blind. Obviously, Daredevil's other senses are heightened because of that. If that makes sense. So obviously, here Kamiya's choosing to be blind. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point about Kanan. That hadn't actually even come into my mind. And he does wear a visor as well, but I don't believe there's any mention that does anything other than and sort of hide his disfigured face. But it's an interesting approach, and maybe it's a different kind of approach to using the Force as well. But I mean, that would be terrifying, wouldn't it? I mean, if you're one wrong move and you don't even have your eyes to fall back on your natural senses. So, but maybe this is why. Maybe it's for cortosis that allows him to do this. It blocks everything out. But it's interesting that the way that I'm reading this, anyway, is that it's blocking out other Force users' influence, but he seems to be able to still channel into the Force and then fight, which is quite an advanced thing to do, even if you've got all of your senses around you. But if you're deliberately blocking off one of them, is this kind of like that kind of stereotype of when one sense is dulled, the others become kind of super attuned.
Yes, and then it just reminds me back to the first episode as well. He's sort of, he's not, when he's wearing the helmet, he's not relying on his vision, right? And then it reminds me to the first episode when Saul's telling the younglings on the temple in Coruscant, close your eyes can deceive you, feel. What do you see? So that the teaching's probably maybe a Jedi teaching as well, actually.
Quite possibly. I mean, we constantly see Jedi kind of doing this. We see them using the, even the first time we see any kind of training with Luke, Ben makes him wear the helmet of the blast shield, and then we later see other Jedi doing the same thing in training in the prequels, and it's kind of all about depriving one sense to enhance the other. But this is, as far as I'm aware, the first that Jedi or Sith that is deliberately in battle deprived himself of or themselves of one of the senses.
Yeah, it's almost like sort of it's not, but it's sort of like he's like chastised himself. He's given himself limitations on purpose. To maybe just test himself, I suppose. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. What did you make of? So it seems that this unknown planet that they are on, which I was certain was Acto, which I'm not so certain now, but it seems like this planet does have cortosis on it naturally.
Well, he sees, or rather, Osha sees that sort of vein of cortosis within the cave. So we can only assume that that's where it's been mined from. If we kind of piece two and two together, which kind of implies that they've been on this planet for a long time, and they've been tapping into this for a while. This isn't just a coincidence. I don't think that they're showing us this vein of cortosis that's running through that cave for a particular reason.
And to me, I got the vibe that like sort of his like their quarters where sort of the bed is and the cooker is seems to be like maybe an old mining facility, a very one that's no longer in use, obviously because he lives there. But I don't know if you got that vibe or not.
Yeah, potentially there does seem to be some signs of life there. There's nothing kind of built up around it, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if cortosis is a thing that has regular applications, then you would think that it might be treated a bit like oil or anything in our world. But at the same time, you would think that cortosis might be, if it's that powerful against lightsabers, you would think that the enemies of the Jedi would be far more frequent in its usage, unless it's knowledge that's acquired around this time and then dissipates by the time we get to the prequels. But yes, it's something that hopefully they'll expand upon and see. I was happy that they actually delved into it in this episode, because it would have been easy for them to just have that databank entry on Star Wars and go okay, we had this thing that kind of shorted out lightsabers, pull me something from the EU, but they actually have delved into it in the episode itself and given us a satisfactory explanation for it.
Definitely. I think for me, this episode, it starts off with, Osha waking up, sort of not bound. She's not shackled or anything like that. She's had her wound treated and she's been put to bed. Sort of she's been taken care of, you could say. She wakes up and sort of Camilla's not there. There's no one there. She's able to get up and, she finds sort of the bag that has May's assassin gear in it, which I think then makes Osha start to realise that May's knocked Osha unconscious, May has stolen her identity. I think in that moment she was able to piece that together. Is what my thought process is on that. And then we see a wander out, and we see something we don't see in Star Wars a lot is fences blocking off walkways, which was really cool.
Well, you see the Sith, or whatever he actually is, that the one thing that they are mental about at this time is guidelines. And I've seen other people make the joke around the place OSHA, which is the name for the like the safety procedures in the States. That you've got to follow the OSHA procedures. Well, you've got 2 OSHAs in the show now.
And something I love that I think does help, because I mean, the way the sea and the way the cliffs and the way the islands are and the colour schemes, like it's very much like Act 2 from Star Wars The Last Jedi. But we see here she comes across some little creatures that are called skura, and they are described in the script as part anteater, part duck. They're those little things we see on the beach, and also the little one that hides behind the clothes before she puts them on. I think that's very important to say, like, there's no pogs here, and trust me, you would see them because they're everywhere if we're on Act 2. But it's trying to say it's similar, but it's different. It's sort of like Act 2 was like super secret to the Jedi, and maybe this planet, which we don't know the name of yet, the unknown planet, is super secret to the Sith because it needs to keep that cortosis secret, because that's what can give them the upper hand against the Jedi, is what I am thinking. And I love the fact that his ship sort of docks almost like, I mean, considering where we live, like if people don't know what Holy Island is, you need to go and Google Holy Island. But like here in the northeast of England, Holy Island's like it's an island that it's been around for centuries, hasn't it? It had like the monks used to live there, things like that. But when the tide comes in, you can't get to it, and the road covered up by the river, the sea. And it give me Holy Island vibes, where like you can see the ship and you can see like the tides come in, so like you kind of get there on foot. And then even Kimia tells you, if you want to swim to the ship, I'd do that now. Otherwise, nightfall's going to fall quick, or you can just wait till the tide goes out and just walk to it. What was your thoughts on the whole setup of how the outdoors of the island looked, and that whole idea of him saying, like the ship's over there, like go there if you want?
I mean, the island, I mean, I love the whole presentation of it. As you say, it's very Act 2, however you want to say it. And you've got to think that's deliberate. I mean, I know Leslie Headland said that she's a big fan, of the prequels, and especially The Last Jedi, where we spent a lot of time on Act 2. So I think it's a fun kind of idea to play with. There's definite differences. If this is Act 2, this doesn't seem like exactly the island that Luke was on. It seems a little bit geographically different, but it could well be, a couple of islands over and so on, something like that. We didn't, as far as I remember in Act 2, there was kind of no other islands to be seen. If you're led to believe kind of, Star Wars lore, where everywhere's got seemingly one port, that there's just one small island on the entire planet. I'm sure that's not the case in reality, though, but they're definitely toying with this. And I think almost by calling it an unknown planet, they're inviting those comparisons, where if they just said, this is, Tosh Bosh or something like that, I don't know, that they'd be like, oh, okay, it's not Octo, but they're continuing that on, and it would be kind of poetic, like it rhymes. That world that was lost to the Jedi was inhabited by Sith for millennia, and until Luke eventually finds it again in between the original and the sequel trilogy. Him offering her to go at any time is a typical manipulative sort of thing. I mean, it's clear that she doesn't take it up. I mean, I think even at that stage, if she really felt that she wasn't under any sort of threat, she would have just gone. But she's just seen this man massacre Jedi left, right, and center. She knows that he's not going to let her go. So I think this is another kind of ploy from him. He's like, hey, come on, you can have a bath, get in the onsen with me. Cool, yeah, I'll make you some soup, no problem. Hey, let's do let me comment on your stance a little bit. It's really good. Lift that elbow up. But I mean, I think it's kind of clear she's his guest that doesn't have any option to leave.
Yeah, let's dive into that. So I think, obviously, Osha wakes up. She's able to get ready. She's able to find a knife. She wanders out onto the sort of the shore of the island here on the unknown planet, and then she sees Kimia sort of walk past in the distance, and she's able to follow him. And he goes for a swim in the sort of the rock pools of the island. And it's obviously where he does go for a swim because on the other side of the rock pools, the water's very ferocious and crashing against the waves, the rocks and waves, and there's waterfalls there as well. But he's in the sort of the the rock pool part, which is quite tranquil and peaceful. And I wonder if there's like a cleanliness to those waters. Obviously, when he gets there, he's still wearing sort of the black garb that he was wearing, the really cool Sid-like robes that are sleeveless, shows the guns off as we discussed last week. But really, really cool.
We show more than the guns off this episode, Pete.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So he obviously removes his robes and he enters and he goes for a swim, which I think he would do anyway, but that shows they are not. But he's obviously he's aware she's there. You can tell by the way the camera pans back. And he's waiting for her to pick up the saber. And when she picks it up is when he makes a comment about it. And he says, "Does it feel good?" As to say, you haven't held one of them in a while since you left the Jedi Order. And
what's he talking about?
When he's in the pool. All right.
You haven't held one of them in a while.
Yeah. But I mean, let's talk about the scene in general because I think part of us was thinking, are we going to see our first Star Wars butt here as he gets out which we didn't, but he's in there naked, I think is what's implied. And when he gets out, I do notice he puts he goes from wearing the black robes to like he just put on a white cloth shirt.
Mm-hmm.
As if he's been and done his dark deed and now he's back on the planet. He's cleansed himself in this rock pool and he's gone back to the white, which I'm not saying it is, but colours are a simple way of telling stories in the cinema, I suppose. And if you go back to Return of the Jedi, Luke, his tunic pops open and reveals the white in that moment when he turns his lightsaber off and throws it away and defies the Emperor and chooses to be a Jedi instead of a Sith. And here we see once he's come out of the rock pool and he's cleansed, he does put the white top on. But just talking through that scene, it was quite, it was implied that he's naked, and she can definitely see that. And, it's not implied that, like, it's just oogling at him or anything like that. But, it certainly makes that situation a lot more sort of intense. And also, for me, I'm thinking, when he says, you're thinking if, like, would it be too sort of barbaric to kill me, A, because he's unarmed, and B, because he's not even wearing any clothes. But just talk us through your in-depth thoughts through that process.
Sure. I mean, I think you're exactly right. That's with the colors. That's what they're getting at. I mean, it's film school 101. But as you point out, in Return of the Jedi, they use it to great effect. And if you notice, Luke's garb gets darker and darker throughout the original trilogy. It's white in A New Hope, then it's a kind of grey color in The Empire Strikes Back, and then it's fully black in Return of the Jedi until that moment at the end when he redeems his father, and then that flap falls down to reveal that, it was actually pure white in there all the time, and Luke wasn't going to turn to the dark side. And I think they're doing a similar sort of thing here, but they're trying to show the shades of grey. This is a bad man from our perspective as an audience, but he doesn't seem to be an awful human being from just, he's taking care of the things around him. He's being rather nice to Osha. He is kind of, doing the opposite of seemingly he was with May. Maybe this is because he's forced to have had his mask taken away and he needs to take a different approach, but it seems like he took very much the tough love approach with May, whereas with Osha, this is very, very much of a gentle seduction of a, you thought the Jedi were saving you, but I left the Jedi for a similar reason, and he's literally bearing all to her, and he's seducing her to the dark side in every way he can. Osha may have been ogling his body, or she may, as hinted at later, she may not be into that. She may have been more into Jackie, but still, he's doing everything he can to seduce her to that side. And I think it was an interesting choice to have him strip off and bare all, because obviously the internet was ablaze with his arms. And I can only assume that's why we're alone today, because certain other people who would normally be on the podcast just melted into a heap when that scene occurred. It's very much that it's a sexual element that we haven't seen a whole lot of in Star Wars. The only other time I can sort of remember that being played with is in, I think, The Last Jedi, when Kylo Ren's constantly got his shirt off the whole time, and Rey has to ask him if he would please put some clothes on.
Oh, indeed. Have you got any closing thoughts about sort of Osha and Kamiya's relationship as it stands in this episode, and sort of where you think it could go in the finale?
Well, I think, I generally I think there's been times before when it's been speculated, whether it's Ezra with Darth Maul or any of the other characters along the way, that a certain character is going to be seduced and fall to the dark side. And it's very rare that we actually see that in Star Wars. I don't know if we'll actually see that here, but we're very much seeing a swapping of the places. I really, really enjoyed this episode. As you know, I was a little bit down on the series, last week. It was kind of wearing my patience out a little bit, but I love this episode, and I could have taken more of it. And the big part of it was the relationship between Khmer and Osha, and this sort of relationship that they have, this blossoming, master and acolyte. We shall see. But I thought it was great. I think that, I don't know if she's going to betray Soul, but perhaps the actual truth will lead her to betraying Soul and going along with the Sith. That's the only thing that I can say this time. But there's always the chance that we do a whole, a 180, and she rejoins Soul and everything else. But I don't think that their stories much left to go. I don't think that story's over, but there's not much left to go in the series. We've got presumably at least a partial flashback episode to go, and then we have the finale as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I do know there's been some talk about this being multiple seasons. Nothing's been confirmed yet, but I do know that the director, she was saying that she's not opposed to doing that. She think it could be a good start. So it may be that there's another season where we'll explore things more, but very much the relationship between Osha and the Master, or the Stranger, in this episode is what I wanted out of the Acolyte. So I'm happy to get some.
No, definitely. And I think, for me, it leaves things open, because I think Osha's very much in a position now where it's like she's curious. I think I can see her being tempted by Khmer, both sexually and also like as a dark side force user and a different way of thinking about the force, and also someone who can give her that identity back. Like, yeah, I'll let you carry the lightsaber. You know how the Jedi didn't let you take that when you left. You can carry that one, no problem. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, the ship's just over there. Don't worry about it. You can go there whenever you want. I just want to talk about how Kimi has priorities. He obviously gets back to this unknown planet. He's able to tend to Osha's wounds and make her feel comfortable. He then goes and, in my opinion, cleanses himself in those rock pools. Changes his shirt to white from black. And then his next priority is fixing his helmet. He makes sure that's fixed like as soon as he can. For himself, but also B as a tool to help turn Osha as well, quite possibly. What were your thoughts on the moment when he pushes Osha to actually like ignite the lightsaber, and she does go for him, but then essentially pulls back, which I thought was quite a Jedi type thing to do. She hasn't killed him in anger or rage. She's pulled back from the hate in that moment.
I think he knows this and he's exploiting it. You know, he knows that she's still too close to the dark side. Sorry, to the light side. She's not going to kill him. He's unarmed, and this is the thing that they've been banging on about again and again. You know, he's kind of endeared himself to her by this point. She's had multiple chances to kill him already with, with May's knife, when he's had his back turned, when she held the lightsaber for the first time on by the side of the pool. He is pretty confident she isn't going to do it, and he holds that lightsaber to his chest. He positions the lightsaber just under his chin, so that even when she pulls away for the first time, if she continues, she'll kill him, but she doesn't. And that is telling, I think, of where she is. But at the same time, really, if you think about it logically, she probably should do. I mean, for all she knows, all of the other Jedi are dead. I mean, she does get it confirmed from him that Sol isn't dead, but can you believe everything that this man's telling you? You don't know. I mean, if you talk about it, if she's being purely a Jedi, she should just kill him and get rid of it, I suppose. I mean, what's the alternative? Is she hanging around to kind of bring him in for justice? I mean, if that man got loose in the Jedi Temple, would anyone be able to stop him? I think it's an interesting sort of prisoner relationship, but she seems to, especially towards the end, when he lets her put the helmet on, be getting Stockholm syndrome and kind of been going towards his side. And it could be quite interesting. She could become somebody with two masters, potentially, Sol and the stranger. And she's caught in the middle between the two. And I suppose kind of that's quite a nice little parallel, because we've been dealing with twins this whole series. What if the real twins, not literal twins, but the twin personalities are actually the kind of the good and the bad sitting on her shoulder in Sol and the Stranger, and she has to forge her own path and make a decision between the two. And you could argue that maybe the Stranger will show more care than Sol did, although then we will go on to talk about this later on, we saw Sol and May have a very, very loving embrace in a kind of a purely platonic way, but Sol couldn't be happier that she survived. And at that time, he's at least pretending, if not knowledgeable, that she's Osha.
Yeah, let's dive in that. So obviously, I think, here we see sort of a very, Kimia takes a very socialist approach with dealing with Osha and introducing Osha to his world. And then, we see a very authoritative Sol with May, especially when he reveals that it is May, so it's sort of night and day different, and probably almost the opposite of what you expect. You would expect maybe the good guys to be as kind as Kamiya's being, and the bad guys to maybe be as cautious as Sol's being. So, let's talk about Sol and May in this situation. I mean, how did you feel about Basil being the one to figure it out?
Well, we pipped that last week, or rather you did. It almost played out almost exactly as you'd said, with the exception of Basil's sweet kung fu moves that he laid on May. But yeah, I mean, I think that was right. The perfect kind of, they brought this character in for a reason. He was perfectly set up with the fact that nobody could understand him except for one character who then died. So there's not an easy way to relay this information. Also, he's got the super smell as well. So I think that was nice. Nice little bit of vindication for Basil, a fan favorite.
What did you make of May's sort of intentions once she gets on board the ship? Yeah, it seemed quite like maybe she wasn't sure what she was going to do.
I think she very much, she wants to kill Sol, but at the same time, she's wrestling a little bit with what's going on inside herself, because she doesn't have a master anymore. She doesn't necessarily have a mission anymore from him, yet she still wants to complete the whole set and kill that last Jedi that wronged her in her mind. But at the same time, she kind of can't resist getting him to admit it. And she's kind of like trying to get him to tell her the truth and admit to it, so that then she can reveal who she is and kill him, presumably. But she is somewhere in between the two positions. She's the opposite. She's wrestling with good here. She's trying not to, look at the Jedi as good people, yet everything, Sol is doing is good. And it kind of contradicts maybe her impression of him. So it's nice. It's another one of it's very well done, this episode, with the twin aesthetic, because we've got two literal twins in two polar opposite situations in terms of the light side and the dark side, and they're both maybe being a little bit convinced by the opposite side's argument.
I know exactly what I mean. And what was your thoughts on Saul when he decides to reveal that he knows, or when he finds out that it's May pretending to be Osha, and he stuns her, and then she wakes up and he's bound out to the bench, and he's very much quite stern about what they're going to do next.
He is quite stern, but at the same time, the first thing out of his mouth is, "I have no intention of hurting you, and I will let you out of those restraints, and I will, do right by you." He's clearly a man who's looking to right a wrong, but we don't know what the wrong was yet. But he's been waiting for this moment that he thought would never come, if that makes sense. Because he even says, I've been waiting 16 years thinking about what I would tell you if I ever got the chance. And now, against all the odds, he has got that chance, and he's got her exactly where he wants her. She cannot move. She cannot not listen to him. And presumably in the next episode, she is going to lie there while he explains his point of view.
Obviously, the episode starts with sort of Saul trying to contact the Jedi for help. The Jedi arrive, and by the time the Jedi arrive, Saul wants something to do with them, and he very much, they take off and leave the area just as the Jedi arrive on Kofor. I don't know what your thoughts were on Saul sort of deciding to call the Jedi, but then changing his mind, I suppose.
Well, the thing that because initially what he does is he tries to call the Jedi, and when he calls it in, he holds off from saying exactly what's happened. He doesn't say there was a massacre. He doesn't say there was a Sith. He doesn't say there was a dark side user. He doesn't say there was anything but that he lost all of his team. That's the only bit that gets through to old Marky Mark. But yeah, he does very much, I think. I think by that point, if he hadn't prior, he's worked out, actually, I've got May right here. If the Jedi turn up, they're going to take her. And I'm never going to get my chance to explain my story and possibly receive forgiveness from May. I think that's probably what he's after. He wants, in his ideal world, to sit there and say, May, this is what happened, X, Y, and Z. And he wants her to go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that you were the good guy, Saul. I forgive you, or I forgive your transgressions if you admit any to me. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think potentially in his idealistic mind, that might be what he's hoping for.
Definitely. And do you also think that maybe he is going to try and get information out of me about where the stranger, her master, could be, so he can track down Osha as well?
I mean, I think so. I think that's part 2 of his plan. I think part 1 is save May and get her to turn to the light side. Part 2 is go save Osha, and then he and May can maybe take care of this together. Because the Jedi, if they turn up, the rest of the Jedi, there's no way they're going to let May go off. There's no way that they're going to. I mean, if I could see Saul almost going to the point of saying, right, you've heard my point of view. You might not accept or like it, but you can see what happened. And maybe she'll go, this is very basic that I'm putting this, but maybe she'll sort of say to him, okay, Saul, I see it. It wasn't you. You were trying your best. It wasn't you. It was whatever else happened. And then maybe he'll say, right, well, we're on the same page now. Would you like a lightsaber? And then they kind of both go off and go and try and take down a former master. And then from his perspective, it's, he hasn't had to kind of run any of this by the Jedi. And we've seen before how he doesn't like the procedures that he's got to go through. He doesn't want to have to fly back to Coruscant and go through all the kind of paperwork to be able to go and take down somebody. He just wants to fly off and do it. And right now, he's just got Osha and Basil. And Osha's probably a little bit more handy with a lightsaber.
I think definitely judging by Basil's moves earlier in the episode.
Yeah. Sorry, not Osha. I mean May. Excuse me.
Yep. And then also, I think he also references that, like, at some point it's probably time to come clean to the Jedi Council about what happened 16 years ago as well. So
yes.
Obviously is something hidden there that they were involved in.
I think he feels guilty. He definitely feels guilty about his part. But I suppose the question is, was he a deciding factor, or was he just going along with what his master wanted? Did his master do something that he didn't agree with, and he was just trying to save the girls? Or was it his decision? Did he light the fire, so to speak? What exactly happened? I mean, we don't know. We're going to find out later on, and this is the fun bit of this series, that we don't know why. And I'm a lot more engaged with the series after this particular episode. Again, I'm kind of more on board as I was with the first two episodes, and I really want to find out now what happened.
And I think we'll find out next week. Let's talk about the Jedi. So there's a comment sort of when we see Jedi Master Venestra. She's very much, when she's on Coruscant, she's talking to a senator who's talking about another senator who's trying to sort of bring up the fact that Jedi maybe shouldn't be used by the Republic, maybe. So, she seems a bit concerned with that bit of politics going on, which maybe might lead into sort of future scenes of the show, I suppose. But then she cuts that message short because Marky Mark comes to tell her that Saul's team's all dead and he's requested assistance. When these guys arrive at Kofor, obviously they told by the locals that, those giant bugs went wild, and that's probably what massacred the Jedi. Obviously, when they go and inspect the bodies, obviously, they've been killed by lightsaber blades or by having necks snapped, not by big bugs. Venestra seems to be hiding something, or she's not telling the whole story. It's in her face. It's in the way she responds to some of the things Mark says. Where Mark says, "Oh well, Saul was the only one here with a lightsaber, who's not here now." So she says that's a very big accusation to make. What she says to him, but she says it in a way where maybe she could maybe use that later on, I suppose. I don't know what your thoughts were on Venestra and on what she's doing in this episode.
Yeah, this was quite odd. That she was. She was quick to kind of say, "Oh, you're accusing Solo. Oh, that's a big accusation," but she doesn't shoot it down either. And like she said in the previous episode, he's a very important Jedi to her. So the only thing I can think of is that she secretly knows what's going on here. She knows who the stranger is, and she's been aware of what's building on in the background, and for whatever reason, she's deciding to kind of hide that at the moment. And should she need to use Saul, then so be it. But it was a bit of an odd thing as well. I mean, she doesn't believe that it's the Umbra moths for a second. She's well aware that there's something more that's gone on here. And the first thing, first question she asks to silly old Mark is, well, what tell me what you see. Well, there's lightsaber blades. Do the Umbra moths, were these Jedi Umbra moths? I don't think so. So she doesn't believe for a second that this was an animal attack. She knows that there's been a massacre here. The only question is it one of their own that's gone rogue, or were they attacked by somebody with a lightsaber? It's interesting. I mean, I wondered, because obviously we get the first look in live action at the light whip. Is that what it's called? A light whip?
So it's a lightsaber, but it can hit. Venestra's lightsaber does have the whip feature. That makes sense.
Okay, so she can use it as a regular lightsaber as well, but she can also use it.
I do believe so.
Okay. We see that, and then we see whip marks on the back of the stranger. Could there be some kind of connection there? Could they have, met before? Could they have fought before? Could he have been a former student of the Nestras and, fallen to the dark side? Something we haven't talked about is probably, Khmer's big statement of the episode, where he said he's a fallen, he used to be a Jedi and he left the Jedi a long time ago. This is implying that he's very old. He's much older than the actor who's playing him. So, I mean, all of these things that they're interesting little pieces but right now they're separated. We don't have that information. But I think Vanestra is hiding something, and to be honest, I don't really trust her. And it could come to the point. Maybe they're taking a fan favorite character, and maybe they're going to turn her bad, and maybe she's the master of the stranger.
Quite possibly. I think it's implied here that we see the light whip in action as the bug comes into shot behind her. I think on purpose. One bug attacks her, she takes out the light whip, and we've already seen the scars on Khmer's back. So I think it's either a very clever misdirect, or we're on the right track. It's one of the two. The fact that he reveals that he was once a Jedi and he did have a master and he left the Order, makes me think, was she his master? If it wasn't her, then have they had an interaction where they've had that fight and she's injured him, I suppose? Time will tell. Something interesting about the unknown planet. So in the EU, there is a planet called Baldemnik. And basically what that is it's known as a cortosis rich world, and it's in the Darth Plagueis model, and it's where Plagueis kills his master Darth Tenenbaums when they visit a cortosis mine in the EU. And Leslie Hedden has stated apparently that 2 Sith Lords will appear in the Acolyte, so maybe we do see a flashback at some point to see both Darth Tenenbaums and Darth Plagueis. Maybe not, but maybe they turn up after they're alerted to the fact that Khmer has thrown the word Sith about and shown people the Cortosis planet. I don't know. What your thoughts are on, obviously, Khmer the Stranger hints at his Jedi Master here, not his Sith Master or his Dark Side Master if he has one. So do you think that would be revealed to be someone different?
Somebody different? You mean? Sorry, do you mean that they're a different Jedi, not Vanestra or not somebody else? Do you mean?
So I mean, obviously he's hinted at having the Jedi Master, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the misdirect or the truth is that it's Vanestra. So put that to one side. Do you think he actually has a dark side teacher, or do you think he just turned to the dark because he was, because of his emotions, because he was an angry guy and liked it, and because of his circumstance? And if he did have a master, do you think it's one of these big name Sith Lords, or do you think it's something different?
I think he does have a master. I think one needs to be shown the ways of the dark side and taught in it. I think your fear and your hatred and your anger will only get you so far. You've got to be able to tap into it and be able to use it to your own advantage. So I think definitely he's had a teacher. I think the question is whether that teacher was a Sith or not. And this is something that I suppose we get into a little bit of a personal quandary. And I'll kind of pose this question to you. Do you like the rule of 2?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
See, I'm on the opposite side where I don't. I think it worked for Vader and Palpatine, but I think it seems like an inherently limiting thing, because we're tying it into this chain. We're assuming that it's Tenebrous or Plagueis or somebody that's around at this time, and we're trying to fit this in, and that kind of really limits you in terms of options at what's going on. And then we have to wonder if those characters are big enough to be brought into the series for your regular fans, that are used to your Luke Skywalkers turning up at the end, or your Kiel Mundis just randomly turning up at places and looking for things. None of these characters have appeared in any live action Star Wars so far, which is what probably the majority of the audience are familiar with. I think that the rule of two. I mean, I miss the days of the kind of pre episode one, before the rule of two was really established. As far as I'm aware, that's when it was really
The
talked about.
the High Republic during the phase of like the Sith Empire, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Right,
I mean, I
right.
know it came about
Not
in
the
the
High
timeline.
Republic, sorry, I mean the Old Republic.
Yeah, I know it came about then in the timeline. I just mean in terms of when we were first introduced to it as an audience. I think it's when Yoda first explicitly says it in The Phantom Menace. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I never read that as there can only be two Sith. I read that as one is always followed with another one. There's always two of them, but that didn't, to me, mean an exclusive two. Like, there's always a master and a student, just like we've always seen there's a Jedi Master and a Padawan. But then that was later expanded and turned into the actual rule of two. And I think, yeah, from my perspective, I think people either like it or dislike it. I could leave it. For me, I wouldn't mind, this being set in a, before that was, really a thing. But if that is the case, and the stranger is kind of pretending at being a Sith and looking at maybe trying to establish this, but isn't aware that there's Sith elsewhere in the galaxy, that probably doesn't, spell a great future for him once they find out that he's been going on and doing this. But I think that he has got a teacher. To go back and answer your first question, I think that there's somebody who's teaching him in the Force. And I suppose if we look at the candidates, it's either got to be one of these Sith Lords from Legends, which I think will have, if they're brought in, will have an interesting response from a fan base where, that Darth Plagueis novel is absolutely beloved. So if it's Plagueis that turns up, some people are going to do backflips, and probably the large majority of the audience are probably going to go, "Who is that?" Or they go with somebody like, Venestra, or Sol, who's a character that we know from this universe and will feel like a betrayal to us as audience members. So we'll have to see where they go with it, really. But I mean, what do you think, Peter? Do you think it's more likely that it's a Sith Lord from Legends? Do you think it's a Sith Lord that we've never met before, or do you think it's a character who we've already met who we don't know is a Sith Lord?
I'm thinking differently, and I've got a question for you. I don't necessarily think he has a master now. He's obviously been taught the dark side of the Force from someone, right? But I don't necessarily think he's reporting to that person currently. So I put it here. Do you think maybe he's been under the wing of a dark side teacher, possibly a Sith Lord, and then since left and is doing his own thing now?
Well, that would be interesting, and that would kind of fit in with the origins of Ren, if that's what they're doing, and if he's going to become the first Ren, and he's kind of splintering off and doing his own thing, and that fits far more kind of akin to the old EU with Dark Jedi and Jedi and Fallen Jedi and various other things, where before the Rule of Two was kind of really canonized. So that's an interesting theory, but we'll have to wonder does that mean that they're going to have a flashback to that? I mean, I suppose at this point it was Tenebris and Plagueis, and then Plagueis later kills Tenebris, and then he takes on Palpatine, Shiv, as his apprentice. But I'm not sure where exactly these fit in the timeline. This is about 80 years before Episode 1.
And I think something to remember as well is that, if you look at Palpatine, right? Like Sidious has Maul as an apprentice. Then he has Dooku as an apprentice, Tyrannus. And then he has Anakin Vader as an apprentice. So, was there any before Maul? We don't know, right? But we don't know Maul's the first either. So, who's to say that the Sith maybe go through apprentices? Like, if they're not doing well, maybe they get rid of them and get new ones in. Does that make sense? So,
yeah, I mean, it would make sense from a logistical perspective. You wouldn't just put all of your eggs in one basket. You'd train up multiple people.
Yeah.
And then say, you can kind of take the mantle of being a Sith, a bit like how we saw was played out recently in the Tales of the Empire. There was only, one position where somebody could be an inquisitor and they had to fight each other to the death for it. That makes sense. But then you get into the logistics of, well, he's not a Sith or she's not a Sith. They're just acolytes at this point. And that's, I suppose this is where you kind of get into the logistics of who, what, where, and how. But I do like that theory that you've got, that he was under the tutelage and he's done his time. And this is maybe I think maybe the odds of that have gone up a little bit
I just
since
feel that if you remember the prequel trilogy, right, and like when we see the Sith, because that's where we've seen the Sith, right, or even the original trilogy, right, Vader reports back to the Emperor quite regularly about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
See him in the prequel trilogy. Dooku and Maul, they're in contact with their master. So I feel like if as soon as he landed, he'd be like, "Oh, master, I've landed back on the unknown planet. I've actually captured Osha." And like the plan's going to plan, so thumbs up. But that hasn't happened. He's very much seems to be living that solitary existence. If that makes sense.
Mm. No, you're right. I mean, we haven't seen that. Doesn't mean it's not happening off camera, but yeah, I think he definitely seems to be living this isolated sort of a life where he's, somehow searching for somebody. They did hint, I mean, Khmer himself, before he was revealed as the stranger, did hint that, hey, you know what the master's like. He collects people. So maybe that's a subtle reference that there's others, that, May isn't the first that's around there. But Khmer was also quite straight in saying, I'm not, I just help out. I do their bidding, but I'm not a trainee. So maybe there is only this rule of two. But it definitely seems anyway. If we look at it straight up and we imagine that there is, then Osha is now trying to is being pegged to replace May. But as we already know, that maybe that's why he's seeking the power, which is, as we know, a master. There's going to be a master and apprentice, and the apprentice must kill the master to seize power. So maybe that's what he's trying to do. Maybe he doesn't want to kill his master until he's got an apprentice or an acolyte in place ready to take his seat.
And then one more thing I'll bring up. So I've found the Wikipedia description of Baldemnik, which is possibly the name for the unknown planet. So on Wikipedia, it says Baldemnik was an ocean planet adorned with rocky tropical islands in the Bakrofasan system of the Ural sector, located within the Outer Rim territories. The hostility of its native Conmi species, together with its extremely harsh climate, discouraged most people from ever visiting the planet, despite the beauty of its giant rock cliffs, pristine beaches, and vast azure oceans. It was mostly of interest to cartographers, xenobiologists, and fisherfolk until knowledge of the planet's rich deposits of cortosis ore fell into the hands of Sith Lords Darth Tenenbaums and Darth Plagueis. And that's the Wikipedia extract on the planet being Baldemnik. So I suppose, what's your thoughts on that then? Just, is there anything we haven't discussed from the episode that you want to discuss?
Well, I mean, that description seems to perfectly align with what we've seen and would lead into, the theory of Darth Plagueis showing up at the end of this. I think in terms of the episode, it's the thing that I really enjoyed about it, and I'd like to hear your opinion on, Peter, is how this episode really slowed things down. We had a couple of episodes where it was, building up, and this is a real nice pause. It's the eye of the storm. Did you enjoy this pause to kind of find out more about the stranger, or what at least he proposes is the truth?
Yeah, what I love about this episode was, as I said at the beginning, the last episode was it was intense all over in its action sequences, in its drama, in its fatalities. So, but you can't keep doing that every episode, otherwise, your audience is going to get fatigued. You need to have a break, essentially. You can't run forever. You know what I mean? So, a roller coaster, you can't do loop after loop after loop. At some point, you have to hit the chains again and be dragged back up the top before you come back down again. If you think of it as a roller coaster, I suppose, a ride. So, they were able to sort of bring us back down here where, there's no fatalities, there's no fights. There's a little bit of a ruckus, I suppose, between Osha and Kamiya, but that's pretty much it. But, we're back sort of, quite a calm episode, but a lot of revealing things being revealed in dialogue, which I thought was really well written dialogue. And the episode had a great pace. And although, again, it didn't wow us with action, it wowed us with what was going on, I think it really went there with Kamiya and Osha in a sense of not only him seducing her with the things he was saying, but also with his body, which I think maybe Star Wars hasn't done a lot of in the past. And I love the whole thing of how we see. That to finish off, the episode's called Teach/Corrupt, right? So, like, who do we think's being taught, and who do we think's being corrupted, and who do we think's being the teacher, and who do we think's doing the corruption? And I suppose the four people, are Kamiya and Sol, and Osha and May. But then also we have this sort of question mark over Vanestra, where is she doing some corruption? So I love the episode because it gave us a lot more questions, and it really propelled the story forward in a way without using any action, which was fantastic. I don't know what your thoughts are on what I've just said about the title, and also your thoughts on what I've said about why I enjoyed the episode.
I think you're very right in terms of the title. There's a deliberate play and duality that's going on here, and they are very very much hinting. Up until this point, the stranger has been a closed book. We only saw him once prior to prior to Kofar, but Saul has been the opposite. But in reality, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe Saul's had all of these deep secrets, and once we find out the truth, actually, we're going to be siding far more with what we assume now is the dark side of the Force. But I think you're very much right. There's this question about who is being taught, who is being corrupted, and obviously the question that's on everyone's mind: where does Basil fit into all of this?
Will he survive? Who knows?
Well, they need. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know if he will. They've been very, very happy to kill off people left, right, and center. And I suppose we think about it at the end, no Jedi can exist at the end of this story, either through death or through, making it out of this and still be aware as a Sith running amok.
Or so we part of the Jedi Order. So if one of them leaves the Jedi, doesn't tell the Jedi, then the Jedi will never find out, I suppose.
Yeah, well, true. Or if they fall to the dark side and join the cause. But I would maybe Basil's only saving grace is that nobody can understand him.
Yes.
So even if he's trying to tell everybody, no, look, I'm telling you, the Sith are back. They're back, and they're just like, okay, Basil, I've got no idea what you're saying. Off you go.
Yep. Have a cracker, Basil, because we can't understand what you're saying. Quite possibly. Any closing thoughts on the episode before we move on to the future?
More of this. This is kind of what I'd hoped when I first heard about the Acolyte. I thought it was going to be more from the Sith's perspective, or at least from the dark side's perspective, and I kind of cooked up an idea in my head that maybe there would be multiple pupils and there'd be training, and it would be about kind of the politics of the Sith and things like that. And it's not quite that now, but that's kind of what I wanted, and this was kind of fulfilling that need. So more of this. I certainly hope that the next episodes really tie this series together, because it had a good start, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion. It had a difficult kind of middle there, but this last episode really nailed it for me. So I'm hoping for a little bit more of that. But of course, we are heading towards the end. We need a flashback, and we need a grand finale as well. I think this episode for me, I might even put up there at the top of The Acolyte. I don't know how you feel, Peter, about that.
I haven't really put them in any order, but like it was fantastic. So yeah, absolutely loved it, and it just keeps me wanting the next episode. And it's funny how you're saying you love this episode and you want more of it. So the finale, which is episode 8, which will air on July 16th. If you're in North America, it will be the morning of July 17th here in the UK and Europe. But that is directed by the same director as this one. So Haneli Culpepper will be back to direct the finale, who just directed this episode, Teaching Corrupt. So hopefully that means for you, it's a different writer. It's Jason McAuliffe will be writing, but it's the same director. So hopefully we get that same feel that you love in this episode in the finale, which would send it off in a good direction for you. But also, again, episode 7, which is out on July 9th. In North America, it'll be the morning of July 10th here in Europe and the UK. That's, again, directed by Cockmanada and similar writers to the flashback episode that we saw on Brandock. So it looks like next episode, episode 7, we are going to see the truth of what happened on Brandock. Did the witches possess the Jedi? Did Kelnaka attack Torben? Why did Torben commit suicide? What did Saul do? What did Indara do? What did the witches do? Was Camilla, the stranger, actually on Brandock? Was he not? Was there another Sith there? Was there not? What were the Jedi doing there in the first place, I suppose? All those questions may or may not be answered, I suppose. What's your thoughts on the next episode being the flashback? It seems like, using our film school heads 1-to-1, it's the same sort of production team on it as was on the previous one. What's your thoughts on us maybe getting those answers?
Well, I think that it's the right time. They've built it up, and I think you need to reveal what's happened, and then we need to feel the fallout and get some resolution in that final episode. We've been with this for a while now. I think we have to find out at least part of what's been going on, and how does Mark play into all of this?
I think Mark is actually secretly going to be doing super kicks to the Jedi and turn the Sith. No, that's a joke. But
he's up there in terms of candidates. I mean, if we look at it logistically, I mean, Chimera's playing the fool, and now Mark is he secretly the Sith Lord?
Quite possibly. I suppose. Where do you think Vinestra and the gang go next from Kofar? Back to the Jedi Temple? You think, or
I don't know. It's kind of left open. That, I mean, presumably I would hope that they've got some way of maybe tracking Saul, or maybe Saul's gonna switch on the comms after he's explained to them or something. They need to, because if the next episode, if the whole thing more or less is a flashback, which we don't know, but let's say that it is, then we've got the final episode. From a kind of raising the stakes perspective, Vinestra and the Jedi need to make their way to this unknown planet, where presumably Saul and May will be heading to go and confront and possibly rescue Osha and the stranger. So I think, that they're going to be, they have to get there narratively. It's just how they get there, if it's going to be the interesting feature. Maybe Basil's going to play another key part, and he's going to, hit a distress beacon or a homing beacon or something on there.
Indeed. And then the one last thing that I didn't bring up was, there's a moment where May, like, sort of resets Pip back to his factory seconds, which might seem like nothing, but, like, Pip has a personality and is really, really important to Osha. And Sol even comments on just how much Pip and Osha mean to each other. And then here we see May just sort of deleting that part of Osha's life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of callous. That, Saul even says, I can't remember if it's before or later in the episode, when he's kind of, talking about how kind Osha is, how, she takes care of that droid, and, even though it's just a droid. And this is kind of, it seems like the beginning of, when people kind of took care of droids as more than just machines, because they're becoming more sentient. And, she just wipes out. She just does a factory reset. She just like restarting an iPhone. Just boop, there you go. We'll reset it back to normal. But you've got to hope for everyone's case, because I think everybody universally loves Pip. I don't think anybody's on the Pip naysayer train, that somehow he's going to be able to get his personality back. Maybe when he's, plugged into the rest of his, the rest of the kind of device. Maybe, May wasn't correct in pulling the right one out of that pile. Maybe it'll retain some of his personality or something. Or maybe this will be something that adds to Osha's abandonment. Now she's been abandoned by the only friend that she's had for the past, 10 plus years that she's left the Jedi.
Indeed. I think one last fun fact from me before we wrap it up is that Basil, who is a Tyne Nan tracker, the Tyne Nans were introduced in the Star Wars EU novel Han Solo's Revenge. So there's a fun fact for you, which actually dates back like the release of the original trilogy in cinema. So I think it was like around the late 70s, early 80s, I think. So he's come a long way. He's finally here on the big screen.
It's good to see. And I love when they do these deep cuts into the EU. And I think some of the best stuff that Star Wars has done is when they've reached back into the EU and brought things forward, brought it into the new canon, used it in a way that maybe wasn't quite so messy after 30 plus years of stories and so on. So I'm happy to see them bring these little elements in, and I think it can often help to tie things in to a more Star Warsy fashion if you're drawing on concepts or creatures that had already been introduced to the Star Wars universe and kind of accepted by the fandom in a certain way. I mean, that probably works more for Thrawn than it does for Basil, but still you understand what I'm getting at here. And I'm still waiting for my Jedi Knight TV series. I want some Jarek and I want some Kal-Katarn.
Kal-Katarn could be coming in the next episode. Maybe not. Probably not. But
if he is, he's well out of place. But we can only hope.
Maybe he's man lost in time. But maybe that's a different franchise. But
maybe he's in the world between worlds.
Yes, well, indeed, that is indeed the correct franchise. Closing thoughts on the episode, Chris, and then we'll take this thing home.
I have been a bit of a naysayer of this series at times. I've been intrigued, but this one really has brought me back on course. It did something that I didn't think was possible to do because I was, I ended the previous episode that we did on a bit of a negatively turned slant towards it. I wasn't particularly enjoying what we've been given, even though we just had a huge lightsaber fest, which I should have been, whooping and hollering from. But I kind of, maligned that it was missing something. For me, this episode filled that hole. It was, what I wanted to hear. I wanted to understand more about what was going on and see it. I understand that you couldn't have just jumped straight into this episode. You needed everything else to set it up, and it worked better for that. But this was part of what I thought was missing. I didn't think that there was one misstep in this episode either. I thought everything was done very, very well, and it was perfect for the story that they were trying to tell.
The only bit you wanted was we wanted to see the butt.
Well, I mean, come on. Yes. I mean, we need more nudity in Star Wars, right?
It'll be some tight buns, I think. He's jacked, isn't he? He's jacked. He is
jacked.
He's definitely been having these vitamins and saying his prayers, hasn't he?
He has, and now he's running wild all over the Jedi, mate.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But Chris, thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, do you want to let people know where they can find you on social media and also where they can listen to you get even wilder about the wildest of topics?
Absolutely. You can find me over at my podcast, which is Dystopian Simulation Radio, which you can find on all good podcast platforms, or on Instagram at d.s.radio. We are a conspiracy podcast, but the fun kind of conspiracy. We do things like, did Paul McCartney really die? That's our latest episode that came out. And we, very much take things tongue in cheek. We want to believe, but we don't necessarily believe. So come over and join us and listen to all of the rubbish that my friend Lindsay and I talk about on that podcast. And, you never know. You might find out the truth about Bigfoot.
Bigfoots are real. That's what I think. Anyway, getting back to the podcast and wrapping this up. Another happy landing from everyone. So thank you very much. You can follow myself on Instagram and X at Geordie Jedi Pete. You can follow the podcast on X at Boars Star. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Star Boars Podcast. Please check us out. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please leave us a top review. You know, a cheeky 5 stars with a lovely little sentence keeps us smiling for a long time, only takes you a few moments, and it also helps other people find the show. And again, if you're listening on any of the other wonderful podcast applications out there, again, just if it has the feature to leave a review, leave us a top review, leave us all of the stars. And again, it keeps us smiling, it keeps people finding the show. And if you share your reviews on social media, we'll definitely give them a like and interact with you. So definitely do that. But again, Chris, thanks for joining me. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. May the Force be with you all. And remember, always tell that to Kanja Club.
The Dorky Diva Show presents
Why is this seat so much more comfortable?
the long-awaited sequel to the adventures of the Zolan Dart audio drama.
Have you seen the captain's datapad?
Trying to work, Murph.
Piloting the Zolan Dart by himself,
You do understand the details of this particular job, correct?
I've been on plenty of jobs like this. With you!
Reldar Sias returns to a planet he thought he'd left behind for good.
Is there a reason you didn't mention I was tagging along?
Hopefully having you there will make others think twice about messing with me.
Making new friends
Oh, you must be the pilot of the Zolan Dart, yes?
I guess I am.
and reconnecting with old ones,
Reldar?
Vera?
What are you doing here?
until past grudges resurface.
I'd be minding my own business if I were you.
Well, if your business wasn't being handled right in front of my face, maybe I could mind my own business. We have to leave. Now.
Why the rush all of a sudden?
We're in trouble.
If it isn't little Reldar Sias.
Hey, Yorick. Long time no see.
Roz already knows you're here.
Oh,
Look who decided to come home.
Reldar must confront his origin,
I must admit, I never saw this as being a part of your past, Softshell.
or let it define his future.
I will get what is owed to me, no matter the cost.
because what Roz is trying to do is wrong.
Says you. My blasters. We're going to need these. Take that, Sleemo.
Who do you think you are?
The Adventures of the Zolan Dart, Episode 2, coming soon.